video at this point. I give up. I keep naming them really random things so they won't get taken down.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. Like the things they do allow.
Okay, I'm gonna start and hope we don't get taken down again.
Woo!
So, hello to anyone who's watching. Welcome to our Friday weekly strikes that we do every Friday online now. So I'm Ruby, and I'm going to start by talking a little bit about, I'm going to start with the land acknowledgement, because I think it's important before we discuss any of the issues around labor that we're going to talk about today, that we acknowledge that we are, at least I am on land that does not belong to me. I am an unwanted settler on this land. This land is the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, as well as the Wendat. And that's really important to remember, especially since we're talking about labor, because all the labor that I do, and I'm also pretty sure Mallory's a settler, and the labor that she does on this land is labor that we're doing as settlers on land that this labor is not necessarily wanted. Indigenous people have not given us consent to be on this land and to do this labor, and that's really important thing to kind of consider. We should also consider that we're talking about this during a pandemic, which is putting Indigenous communities at even more of a risk than they might normally be, because lots of Indigenous communities, due to our colonial system, don't have adequate infrastructure to I guess fight the pandemic. So if you don't have access to water, which is there's lots of water advisories in lots of Indigenous communities, how are you supposed to do something as basic as wash your hands, which is important in fighting a pandemic. And then additionally, there are still man camps in Wet'suwet'en building the pipeline, which I don't think that's an essential service. That's bringing the possibility, that increases the possibility of bringing the pandemic to vulnerable Indigenous communities in that region. And they're not building a pipeline is just not necessary. It's not an essential service. And so that's all really important to consider when we're talking about labor in Indigenous communities. I don't know if Mallory wants to take over from there. Yeah, sorry.
I'm Mallory. Yeah, as Sophie said, I'm with Fridays for Future TL. I've done some work on outreach, especially with universities. I'm a graduate student right now, so that's how I kind of fit into a lot of work that's been going on. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about kind of our International Workers' Day or International Labor Day, which a lot of us refer to as May Day. I want to briefly start off saying what May Day has been and where it came from historically. The very first May Day was in 1886, and that's when over 300,000 workers walked off the job, just left from over 13 companies in the US. And they were fighting for something that we all really take for granted. That's the 8-hour workday, among many other workers' rights. But think about how much we owe those kind of original or some of the earlier workers and laborers who fought for that. So today is a day that annually it's important that we stand up with our fellow workers for workers' rights, and we owe them a lot. So you might be asking, how is this climate related? How is this climate change? I thought this was a climate issue. But as we learned, and with many of our other strikes and our other stuff, climate justice is an intersectional issue, right? It fits in with so many other intersections of our lives, and our success or our failure is going to largely be dependent on how we make this transition from fossil fuels and mega corporations to clean energy industries without leaving any workers behind. And that phrase, leaving workers behind, is a huge talking point for billionaires and corporations to continue exploiting their workers, taking advantage of our people at the expense of our planet and our lives, which seems like a lose-lose situation for a lot of people, for most people. But all serious climate justice advocates understand that exploiting workers and the planet is not congruent with climate justice. That is not gonna work. So now, today, it's time to spread the word. It's time to show that climate justice is workers' justice. So I'm excited to get in some discussion questions today and just kind of chat. It's going to be cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask Mallory a question also. If any of you who are watching have any questions, you can send them to the chat, and then our wonderful moderator will send them to us and we can answer them. So first, like, what is labor? And like, I think kind of already answered this, but like, what role does like our workforce play in the right to a like just transition, which is like one of our demands, also sort of part of like a Green New Deal, which we talk about a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So workers' rights are human rights, right? Because most humans are workers, and the labor movement specifically are workers organizing themselves to stand up for what is right for them in the workplace. So we have worker unions to thank for safe working conditions, for 8-hour days, like I said, equitable benefits, and anti-oppressive conditions, among many others that are distinct to each industry and to each corporation, each job, each person. So right now, today, in Canada, food couriers are fighting for fair pay and for hazard pay while they put their lives at risk. Things like Foodora, Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes. Workers from Amazon, Whole Foods, Target, Instacart, they're all also striking today for benefits. I'd like to real quickly read their demands. And I got this information from the Instagram account Day Laborer Network, which I really, if you are on Insta, follow them, they're great. And so what Amazon and Whole Foods are asking for, they're asking for a shutdown of infected sites, followed by a 2-week quarantine based on the CDC recommendation, no testing restrictions on sick leave, hazard pay, that's highlighted in red too. I think that's really important. Stop delivery and warehouse quotas that risk workers' health, stop shipping to non-essential items, stop retaliating against workers who speak out on safety conditions, and move to delivery-only model for Whole Foods. Target workers are demanding hazard pay, protective equipment for all workers, and better safety procedures like requiring customers to wear masks. Instacart is asking for hazard pay, for protective equipment, and a 10% default tip in the app, because customers can still choose to pay 0% tip, and they want a paid sick leave. All of these things are super reasonable to me, and I think that we need to support them. So they are the reason that we are on strike today, and why a lot of people are around the world. Our global strikes, are rooted, that we've been doing our global strikes we've been doing for a while, and our weekly strikes are rooted in the workers' struggle. We took that striking from our jobs to show that we have power from that kind of movement. So we're fighting for health and safety, women's rights, BIPOC rights, and all things like that that came from those who are willing to stand up, and they inspire us like hugely. So today, important, don't cross the picket line, right? Do your best if you can to not order from Amazon or use FedEx, to not shop at Whole Foods, Target, or Walmart. I think Target's not in Canada. I'm from the US originally, but still don't shop there. And don't use Instacart or Foodora or Uber Eats or Skip the Dishes if you can. And I know a lot of the times we have to use products that we don't want to, or use services that come from places that we don't want to, especially if you're someone who is at risk or immunocompromised, or just someone who can't get to a grocery store for many, many reasons. And these are life-saving services. Like, these are important services. But that's kind of all the more reason, right, to support their workers so they can keep doing this service in a safe and healthy and equitable way. So if you can, save your shopping for tomorrow, at least. And really, like, the big thing is knowing that strikes do work. You can look at history. We've seen so many things we have to thank today for based on laborers. So something I wanted to ask you, Ruby, is why is labor organizing kind of essential to ensuring a just transition for all of us?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time people see sort of like the labor movement as the opposite to climate action, because there's sort of like Western understanding of labor is very centered in like, let's like produce as much as we can, let's increase our production, let's make money, let's meet our quotas. Like, it's less of a like connection to the land, or like less labor as like trying to improve our society, or labor is like producing what we need to like survive. And I think this applies to lots of sectors, right? It applies to like the auto sector. This applies to like fashion, in terms of like fast fashion and people who overconsume way more clothing than they need, like the food sector, but then also like the energy sector, which is something we talk about a lot when we talk about like climate justice and like a just transition. And I think like a really good example I wanted to talk about of like labor organizing in terms of like energy. So in Alberta, there is a group called Iron and Earth. And so according to their website, Iron and Earth is led by oil sands workers who are organizing, like who are doing like labor organizing in that, like the oil sector. So a relatively sector which produces a lot of carbon emissions and is not the best for the environment. And they are organizing they are committed to incorporating more renewable energy like projects into their work scope. So they want to basically like as much as they can use more renewable like energy in their work. Their website, which you could go and check out, is ironanearth.org. And also if you go on YouTube and look them up, there's a video that like explains it really well. And like this is like a really amazing foundation that's like that's like using labor as a means of like also like campaigning for like a just transition. So these are like workers who are who I think a lot of them can, at least like for me, I can see how like as an oil worker, I might see, oh, we're trying to phase out oil, like, or we should be phasing out oil, like I might lose my job. So this is like a really cool way where like they want a just transition for themselves and they don't want to lose their job, but they also would like there to be like renewable sources of energy. And so like obviously like still like a lot more needs to be done like by our government through legislation that like changes the system to allow these workers like a just transition, but this is like a good example. So like for Mallory, like what are key challenges that need to be addressed in terms of like transition?
Sure. So it's kind of tricky. I think we all kind of think here at FFF that a huge problem is kind of solving a division, or not even necessarily a division, but just a lack of cohesion between trade unions and working class and climate advocates and other advocates, because we're going to rely heavily on two things to do those, and that's addressing job loss, right, like you were mentioning, and the creation, which is the flip side of that, and then maintaining income so that people aren't suffering during this transition. So one thing we can do is like, even if you are not someone who is like participating in a union or a worker, you're still part of a community and having this labor and community joint action together. So that's going to make our movement go forward, because that kind of is like this power in numbers. When we work together, we can always like achieve a lot more. We need subsidies for and regulations requiring low energy and energy reduction initiatives for these corporations and for these industries. So like low energy appliances, things like that. Renewable energy initiatives such as solar requirements for new buildings and retrofits for old buildings, which is totally possible. And then we need regulations requiring local production of those products, right? Keeping it local, keeping it small, keeping it in a way that is much more reliant on those around us is something that is going to just give us a lot more opportunity together, right? When you know the person next to you, you're able to rely on them a little bit more. So something right now we can do in the GTA is voicing our opinions on an issue close to both the climate and the labor movements in Hamilton happening right now. So I want to point this out. The Ford government wants to ramp up the greenhouse gas pollution from Ontario's gas-fired power plants by more than 300% by 2025 to help fuel this massive increase in fossil fuel electricity and climate-threatening pollution. Enbridge wants to import fracked gas from Pennsylvania by building a large pipeline in Hamilton, a pipeline that would degrade a large and important land and raise our gas rates by $120 million. I'm going to repeat that. Raise our gas rates by $120 million. It's not only is it like going to harm a lot of people, it's also not even an economically viable solution. So we don't need to be doing this. Let's work together for each other and for our planet, because also they're the same. But anyways, so that's from a petition, actually, what I just said, by the Ontario Air Alliance. And we're going to share a link for that petition in the comments here ASAP, I think. And that would be really great. So that's an issue you can do right now, which is great. And moving on to that, what we can do, Ruby, what are some other steps we can take at our workplace, specifically, not just in our communities, but a lot of us do work. So what's up with that?
Well, so you could obviously, if you work somewhere, like if you are like a unionized worker or you work somewhere where like you can join a union, you should join your union. Unions overall have been losing a huge amount of membership in the past several decades. And so it's like really important to like join your union. Like getting organized is also like means you can like effectively communicate with your fellow workers for equity. Like unions are like really like they're pretty well organized and like they're really good ways of getting involved. If you're already in the union, you can help make your union ready to fight for climate justice with some like resources, which hopefully will get shared. I think they're going to get shared in the comments, but I'm also going to talk about them. So if you go to visit laborcouncil.ca/climate, so like the word visit labor council.ca/climate, there's some different resources. So one of them is there's a climate justice motion and plan of engagement, which is kind of like a plan that talks about like a sustainable approach to becoming leaders in like sustainability. Basically, it gives you sort of an outline of how your union and like how you can do work in your union to fight for green jobs and equity and a just transition to a sustainable economy all at one time, which is pretty great. You can also join the Labor Climate Justice Network, which has labor climate roundtables and like caucuses. And I think that's pretty cool. They're a great way to connect with like other like union members and like brainstorms ways to build like power in terms of like climate justice and also just power generally in your workplace. There is a email that you can contact about this. I think that should get sent in the chat. I don't think like saying an email out loud makes sense, but yeah, you can email them and like they can give you more information. And also you could create a joint, like an environmental committee within your workplace or within your union. And you could sort of like chair that or help start that and sort of push for like climate in your union. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think now we were hoping to kind of just, this is maybe informative, but it's just kind of fun to like ask each other a little bit about our personal experience with this issue. So Ruby, Ruby's a high school student, right? Why are youth in high schools like worried about, why should they be, or why are they worried about workers' rights when many of them aren't, actually workers yet?
I think there's two. I think some high schoolers are workers, and I think generally high schoolers are taken less seriously in the workplace. I know like at my job, like I've had a lot of issues where like I think like sometimes I'm taken less seriously or like my opinions are not heard as much by like our superiors because people like, I mean, they look at us as like children a lot of the time. And so I think that means that like a lot of high schoolers are less likely to like be given like a safe workspace. They're more likely to be given really like bad schedules or like be given like really like long hours or like not be given their break properly because they're less likely to like know that they need to stand up for their rights. And so I think like it's important because it's just like important for high schoolers who work. And then also like I'm in a position where like I'm in grade 12 and so like I'm thinking about the fact that like I'm like thinking about what my career is going to be, right? I'm thinking about going to university and then going into a career and like joining the workforce. And like I can see how like I guess people who don't have like I think like I have to think about that to some extent. Like what are going to be my benefits? Like am I going to have like a safe work environment? Like am I going to like have good like work hours? Like that's important to think about. And so for me it's like maybe right now this like fight for like workers' rights doesn't necessarily directly impact me, but it will. And I can very much see how it like affects like is related to climate justice, which is really important to me. And I can also see how like you really can't have a Green New Deal and like a green economy without like labor rights. And I think the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to make that transition. And like we really do have a time limit. Like by the time I'm done university and really entering the workforce, we're going to be down to like 5 years before our like deadline. And so like that's a long like that's not a very long time to make like a huge transition. So it's important now because we also just have this deadline. And so I guess I'm gonna ask you, Mallory, like how are scientists impacted by like workers' rights movements, and like how does this affect like the science community?
Yeah, sure. So like I think I said earlier, I'm an ecology grad student. So I'm one of the laborers for sure in the community, but we have our unions too. I'm a part of CUPE 3903. The faculty, the profs have a union that is separate, and we go on strike, then that's something that you've probably heard a lot about, university striking for more equitable payment and equitable working conditions. And so, it's easy to forget that, anyone can be in a union. Like unions are for anyone who does labor, and that's most people. So scientists specifically, as a grad student, a lot of us are working towards a climate solution and to solutions at large. But like think about right now during COVID, like a lot of scientists working round the clock, like really going wild for this. And it is unfortunate that a lot of our challenges that like scientists are working to fight or to solve problems or solve the challenges of, they are kind of just at this front line of having to do this. And so there's still a lot of stuff we need to do to make sure that we are being treated fairly, that we are being able to do this long term, that this isn't going to burn us out, that we're not going to experience things that prevent those who should be working in the group as a researcher, as a scientist, from getting in. There's a huge problem of inequity between women, BIPOC, like lots of people who are at a disadvantage in academia. And so, that's a big part of what being in a union is for a lot of academics. So that's like a great question. I think all academics ought to unionize, and I think a lot of us are. And then lastly, I kind of wanted to like bring up, I know a lot of us are probably, who are watching might be wondering, how can I like get involved with Fridays for Future Toronto? Because they seem so cool and great. So like Ruby, I know you're really big on recruitment and intake. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Literally, I have not had a conversation with someone in the last like 2 weeks where I haven't tried to recruit them. I think people are actually annoyed by me trying to recruit them.
You could just stop for me. I haven't had a conversation with anyone in 2 weeks, period.
So it kind of depends if you're in high school. So right now we're sort of looking at ways to like engage like different aged people. So, but regardless, whether you're in like high school or university or not a student anymore or in a gap year or anywhere kind of around that age, so you're just kind of a youth and you want to get involved, you can either DM our Instagram account or you can email our email. I'm also pretty sure if you go to our Instagram and you go to like the link tree, there's a link to an intake form you can fill out, which is directed like more towards high school students because we made it for like doing more high school intake. But even if you're in university, you can fill it out, and then we could use it as a way to sort of direct you to the correct people for that. Especially if you go to like a college, we really need people at the colleges right now. Like colleges, even if you go to a college and you know someone who goes to a college, like
send them our way, baby.
Love more people in universities, or if you're like not in university at all and you're just like in the workplace or whatever, that's great too. And then same with high school. And so those are like really cool ways you can get involved. And even if like you're not able right now to say like get involved like more full time with like organizing, you could also just go to our website, which is fridaysforfutureto.org, and you can like at the bottom of the homepage you can like sign up for like our newsletter, to at least like so you can like stay updated on like future events and like come to cool things. We have a movie night starting on Saturday, so tomorrow night we're going to be watching The Lorax, which you're more than welcome to come to and come watch it with some of our super cool organizers like me and Mallory. And yeah, so there's lots of ways to get involved. You should all get involved.
Oh, that's so great. Thanks for that, Ruby. So I don't know, we're kind of wrapping up now. Overall, we just kind of want to like reiterate that these solutions for labor are really about making our future for everybody as just and fair as possible. Hopefully this work will help ensure that no worker gets left behind, because that's not the goal for climate advocates, because that is the climate solution. So yeah, thanks so much from me.
Yeah, Thanks from me as well. I hope you come next week. Next week, we're going to be doing a super cool French strike. We're going to be able to have guests from all over the world. It's going to be moderated by our amazing Ali Rougeau, who's like a francophone. It's going to be super cool. So even if you don't speak French, you can come and just listen to people speak French. And then if you don't speak French, you can't come next week. It's not next week. Oh, okay. It's the week after. My notes said that it was next week. So next week we'll have a normal strike, it'll be in English. So you should come next week for that. And then the week after on the 15th is a special French strike. So you should also come to that.
I'm gonna try and listen and work on my high school French. That is pretty bad.
Yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if anyone has questions. We haven't gotten any sent. So thank you to everyone who came today. I hope you have a good May Day. There's lots of May Day events going on and like May Day live streams happening like throughout the day. So you should tune into like more of those. And yeah.
Yeah, seriously. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you later.